The tutorial series I've been working on, I've dubbed it GG 1301. Basically, the 1301 is like my English class that I had back in college, English 1301. So that's where I got like inspiration for it. So basically, like Guilty Gear College, if you will, Guilty Gear class, Guilty Gear school, right? It's basically where that came from. The first tutorial I wanted to go over was movement, because I think movement is by far the most important part of this game series. There's no other. I felt there's no other thing that's that much more important, you know? Like, movement is just by far like your biggest lifeline. Every character moves differently, obviously, you know, from, at least in this game in particular, you know, Bedman's got 8-way movement, you know, Ino's got a hover dash, amongst other things, right? But I'll get into that in a bit. The notion here, once again, is to get you guys ready for Guilty Gear Strive, right? So I know some people have been playing Xrd, you know, Plus R is out, you know, with the new beta, with the rollback and whatnot. Everyone's been playing that. Everything that I'm going to tell you here applies to that game and does apply in Strive. And like I said before, movement is like the single most key component of this series. If you're not good at this, it is highly advised that you spend time learning how to do this now in this version. And I picked Xrd because it's the most recent version of the game. I can show you stuff in Plus R too, which I might alternate between. But for the most part, I intend to stick with mostly Xrd since it's the most newest one. So on movement, right? Obviously, you know, it's unlike much like every other fighting game, you know, movement is pretty basic in a basic sense. So walking back, walking forward, crouching, jumping. Guilty Gear gives you the ability to double jump, and there's also super jumping, of course. There's the movement options such as backdashing. Backdashes tend to have variable invincibility frames, but it's also part of your movement, right? Then you have your run, and some characters have dashes, like Johnny, you know, in this game, Leo. As I mentioned before, Ino has a hover dash, and Bedman in this game in particular has a different kind of like walk and run type deal, right? So, but for characters who have the traditional run and whatnot, you know, you do have a run. Then there's also air dashing forward and backwards, so air dash forward, air dash back. You know, these are all your options for just getting around the screen, catching up to your opponent, right? Now, a big thing about running in this game is that when you run, you have stop animation, right? And that will allow you to get hit, which is unfortunate. But if it was any other way, it would be probably too good for this game, right? So there are other mechanics in which you can use to help save you with that. So in this game, there's Faultless defense, which is done by holding back and pressing any two attack buttons. So it could be punch and kick, punch and slash, kick and slash, you know, slash hard slash. But you can't use dust in doing this because it'll just trigger your burst. So stay away from that. Use whatever's comfortable for you. It doesn't matter as long as you can execute this. That's the most important part. So for me, I use punch and kick. Whatever you play on, if you have a shortcut key playing on your, you know, your pad, your stick, hitbox, your keyboard, it doesn't make a difference. As long as you can execute this, you're in the money, right? Now, the thing about FDing is that it does drain your tension gauge, right? So I run forward with Soul, build some tension, and it will drain. It won't drain right here like this because of the training mode, right? Because it's set to default 50 gauge. So with that being said, Faultless defense basically works as a command block. So think of it as like a block button, like in say Soul Calibur, right? Obviously, but it costs something, right? You can use this in the air, you can use it on the ground. You cannot use it to cancel an air dash. That just doesn't work. It's just not a mechanic in this version of Guilty Gear. I do believe there's something similar to this in Strive. I believe has a way to like air dash and cancel it with FD, if I recall right. It's been a while since I played the beta, but that's how you would basically use this mechanic, right, to block. So what you can do is run and use the Faultless defense to cancel the stop animation so you don't get hit, right? So for example, you run in, you try to block, Kai can hit you, right? But you can block if you use this correctly. You can also do other things like using it for your backdash, but that depends on how far you run in and the normals that you're trying to bait, right? So you're probably wondering, well, what does this give you? You know, it gives you the ability to move around the screen safely. It gives you the ability to bait. So it makes it so that your approach is unpredictable, right? So if you think that the Kai player in particular, since he's constantly using this button, his far slash, to stop you from moving in, right? You can FD stop outside of range and counter poke. And it depends on what your character has, you know. A lot of times you can just use your forward punch as a way to counter poke. You know, the idea is that you have a way to whiff punish. You have a way to safely approach. That's one. You have a way to whiff punish. 2 and 3. Most importantly, your approach isn't straightforward. It isn't obvious. You know, so that's a great way to attack someone on the ground. A great way to move around, right? Like I said, you can't use it with your air dash, right? But you can use it with your jumps, right? So if your opponent wants to meet you air to air, for example, right? So you can just block. So if you think that you're gonna go air to air, or your opponent might come up with you, you can do that as a means of just forcing yourself to block. You can block normally if you want to, but if you just want to add that extra layer of safety, that's what that's there for, right? You can still get air thrown. You still are prone to getting attacked, even if they don't staircase you. But more often than not, in general, most players may try to meet you in the air for air to air, or they will try to air throw you. Sometimes the air throw is more or less the option that they try to go for, but in other times there may be an air to air case. So. But even though you are doing this and you're command blocking, you can always double jump away, okay? You're not just locked into it. So if they come up looking for an air throw, so it should be an air throw, right? Even though they're coming up for that, right? You can always double jump and you'll make them miss. At that point, you can counter poke them. Or if you instant block, but that's not what this is about right now. There's many options you have here. There are other things to note on the ground with your mobility, right? So in Guilty Gear, there is run momentum, right? And that momentum from your run is carried over to your jumps. So it makes your normal jump that looks like this. It kind of stops here, right? To dash jump, and you're further out. Because you can carry on this momentum, it makes your approach a lot more unique when jumping, makes it a lot more dynamic. Because that's the biggest thing about Guilty Gear, right? The mobility. That's also carried over to your neutral jumps. Because if you neutral jump normally, you don't go anywhere. But if you run, your neutral jump goes somewhere, right? You have a little bit of momentum still held within the neutral jump. So essentially, see how your normal jump stops here, like right where the sword is at? That's a neutral jump. So you get a little bit more range than a forward jump, right? And that just depends on like how you go about it. Since I'm on hitbox, I can do a little. I like micro dashes and jumps are a lot more tighter because I'm playing on a hitbox. So my angles could be a little bit more tricky. That doesn't mean you can't do this with a stick or a pad. Keyboard doesn't make a difference. You can still do these things. The concepts still remain the same. Now the momentum is still carried over through your jumps no matter what. So even if you forward jump, you still have that same momentum from the neutral jump. You can neutral jump, and still do the same thing. So what this does, this makes your normals a lot more dynamic, even on the ground, right? In other fighting games, specifically KOF, right? When you run in those games and you attack, use your normals, the character still stops in place and does their normal. They don't have sliding momentum, so they don't carry the run momentum. Guilty Gear, you still get to keep the run momentum. So Soul's far slash won't hit from out here, right? But if you dash into it, you will, right? So that makes learning how to use your normals a lot more dynamic than just, okay, I ran, I stopped, now I can do this normal. No. You use your momentum to essentially add that extra range to the normal that doesn't have that range. Does that make sense? So again, if you're out here, you press it, it doesn't make contact. But if you run, so you can learn how to tip your normals. That also applies to FD stop. Now, if you FD stop and do normals, now your character will stop in place, right? And that's another technique in which you can use with your pokes to like set up pressure, counter poke, etc., etc. Right? Now in the air, when jumping, you want to mess around with like your angles, right? Because attacking in Guilty Gear from different angles is probably one of the most important things in the game that not a lot of people tend to talk about, right? So I'll set Kai to block, right? Miss. See, so you have to play around with this. And I want you to take note of the hit sparks, right? Note where they're hitting Kai. See how further out that was? A lot more tip range, right? Gotta use super jump. Just turn around. Super jump helps you turn around a lot quicker in these situations. Because if you run over your opponent and double jump, jump, they won't turn around. But if you run jump, then they'll turn around. If you super jump, easier time to turn around. Okay. And again, note where these moves are hitting. Pay attention to where the hit sparks are at, and like the range in which I'm hitting with Soul, right? So I'll do forward jump, neutral jump. Now again, when you're running, you get to hold onto that momentum. So if you forward jump from walking and then neutral jump, you stay in place. But if we see, then we run super jump. Okay. Again, very important. You can also use jump punch as a means to time your normals to hit a little bit later. Instead of hitting like right on top. This is also another tell in which you can use to use your normals to attack with. So you guys see the angles? You see how like different you can use that same normal, and like you can land it at different angles, different ranges, barring how you use your jump. Okay, so learning how to manipulate run momentum, FD braking when running, all this stuff, like it really helps. It really helps your neutral game. It really helps you be more evasive, and yeah, it just makes your game more complete, right? And I'll be the first one to tell you that, like, in learning how to move, you'll take a lot of damage. You may lose a lot of games, but that's not important. You know, you want to drill this into your game, right? One of the things I will encourage you guys to always do is practice FD braking or FD stopping your runs a lot. Practice this, get used to it, okay? This is very important. You know, you may sap your attention pulse. So what that is like your ability to build meter. See how I'm building meter down here with Soul? From just forward, any kind of forward movement builds meter in Guilty Gear, right? So see, like, if you do this, you will definitely stop your meter from gaining, but that's not the point. The point is to approach safely and to move around safely, right? Because a lot of people will think, you know, in Guilty Gear, oh man, I have air dash. Air dash is how we approach, right? This is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to just air dash at everything. No. It's more important to use your double jumps in Guilty Gear than to air dash. Air dash is used to cover ground, and you don't have to make your air dash hit your opponent. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not important. If someone's doing something kind of blatant where you can like use your air dash to escape, then that's more important. You know, than like, all right, let's play out here from neutral and let's air dash in, right? When that's the quickest way to lose. For example, his fork punch is a little tricky. There you go. Take an anti-air like that. That's too much damage to take, and that's not even an optimized combo. People have in Guilty Gear, it's very common for someone to have a full-on anti-air air combo. Like, they're always ready for you. Like those, and you should have those down too, as long as you're playing the game, right? You know, and it's the same for this, right? They may air to air you, you know. They may air throw you. This video isn't about your normals per se, but learning how to utilize your jump cancels as a way of movement once you start mounting pressure, right? You know, you can do stuff like that. You know, do you decide whether you want to return to neutral, bait something out, You know, so that's kind of what your pressure would look like, you know, while utilizing your jump cancels. Everyone has different jump cancels with your character, so just mess around and see what you got. Focus more on hitting your opponent when they're crouching. For this demonstration, I just have Kai standing just because it's easier for me. I'll give you an example of pressure and utilizing your movement to escape, right? Not a very common situation, right? But it is an example. See? You can run out of the corner and try to turn the situation around. Now Kai's normals are obviously long, so it's gonna be a little difficult to just get out the corner for free. Now granted, if that was chip, you'd be out of there. And the good thing is, since you're facing this way, even though your character is running, right, you're still considered walking backwards. You don't really gain any meter, but it will allow you to FD. So even though you run out of the corner in a situation, you know, it's still not necessarily their turn. But, you know, it just depends on your character. So that's like a very basic way. And different run speeds are a thing, right? So remember I mentioned this with Chip, right? Chip will be able to run away from the situation pretty easily. It helps that he is like, see, the move won't even hit Chip because he's the fastest character in the game. So you have to also mess with your run speed. Run speeds are a thing too. And you can turn the situation around. Now granted, that's not the most optimal thing to do. The options that you go for turning around the situation is entirely up to you. Let's say that they're like, alright, I want to use, let's say the Kai player's like, I'm going to use big fireball in neutral, RC, and I'm going to do this to approach to try to scare you, right? You can use your double jump, right, to get around that. And this is something that kind of happens around the mid to low level gameplay. I use my run momentum and I double jumped away from Kai. Now of course you're probably thinking, well, that's kind of easy to get away from. But I want to point out that what's happening here is like the fireball covers the ground and Kai's going to cover the air. You know, that's why I chose this example. Now Kai could essentially double jump and try to air throw and try to sniff out, you know what I'm saying, the double jump, you know, but that's up to you, right? You can choose to attack Kai on his way up coming at you, which is part of your movement, right? You decided to jump into that space and you have the option to attack, double jump away and see what he's going to do. But keep in mind, if you do exhaust your double jump, then he can air throw you, maybe he can staircase you down with a block string, you know, etc, etc. So you have to make the right decision. You just never know. You have to make the right call based on the situation. You have to feel it out. And it kind of dips into situational awareness and how to utilize your movement to escape certain situations. And this is without introducing, you know, instant blocking. That's a whole nother video, right? Now, in regards to that, you can always use your FD, your faultless defense, as a means to push out your opponent and allow you to use your movement option to escape a situation, right? So in terms of FDing and trying to use your movement, in some cases you may want to use, like, you want to confirm your block, right? And then continue to FD. And you might push them out, etc, etc. But we try to jump in this case. Now if they do a big enough block string, you may not have to do that, so you kind of have to experiment. So if you look at this for what it is, right? You know, we air dashed in, or if we just jump forward, if I can get out of there, I'm instinctively air dashing. We avoided that, and we're back to neutral. You know, of course the Kai player could YRC, but again, we're getting into more variables. I'm trying to break this down as simple as possible. So that's pretty much how to utilize your defense, your general defense, as a means of like helping you use your mobility. Because defense and mobility, they go hand in hand in this game. They're like I said before, faultless defense, breaking, using your faultless defense, and utilizing your run momentum, your jumps, your air dashes, your super jumps, like all of that, like it's too important. And I'm gonna stress it, like I can't stress it enough. Like movement is like the most important thing about Guilty Gear. There's no two ways about it. You know, this trails back to even the older games, right? from Midnight Carnival to Reload to Slash to AC to plus R, you know. Even in the old games, like your mobility and how you utilize it is like it's your lifeline. You know, this is coming from someone who made Chip, you know, and with Chip, like you have to know how to do it, and it doesn't just apply to Chip, but you know, because with Chip you have such low HP, right? So if you can't move around the screen properly and you run into everything because you don't want to utilize your faultless defense breaking and stuff like that, your jump FDs, you know, instant blocks, but again, another story, you know, you're just gonna have a bad time. And for new players and even intermediate and even veteran players, like it's still important for you to practice this, because you'll find yourself taking way less damage. Yes, you will have to take some lumps in terms of learning how to utilize this properly, but it's better to get it down than to not. Okay, even in like at the intermediate level, a lot of people still do die to poor movement. It's kind of a shame, because they can just, all it takes is just holding back and just tapping FD. You know, you don't have to hold it, right? But you can tap it. I'll also toss in here as a bonus that you can also use it as a means of throwing. You know, that's a part of your pressure. That's part of utilizing your movement. So not just using your pokes, but utilizing, you know, this for a throw. And the way you do it is you run at your opponent, you FD, and then you're already holding back, right? So just tap FD and then hit the heavy slash button. So it's all in one fluid motion. But at the same time, you're probably like, wait a minute, they might hit me. True, they might. But if you utilize this technique, it basically, it's a 2-in-1, right? So if your opponent is trying to hit you, you know, before you get in, you can always FD. You can always FD stop. You know, you don't have to commit to the throw right away. His button's a little slow, so we'll just use slash. See? I committed to it. You even hear it. You can see it in my inputs. So we got close enough to grab it that time. Close enough to grab it that time again. See? So it's basically a way to get a safe throw. It's by far one of the strongest techniques you can learn. If you can master this, then you've literally, if you want my honest opinion, if you can get this down, not even just master it, because even I'm still learning, right? If you can get this down, if you make this a big time priority in your game plan, you'll find yourself taking way less damage. You'll find that your opponent makes way more mistakes than you do just by dashing slightly in their face. As an addendum to mobility, there are other characters who have options like these too. But other characters have other ways to use their movement. Johnny has had a wave dash since the dawn of time. And the way you do it is you pretty much dash. And what you want to do is you want to hold FD. And you dash forward, and then you just hold FD. And you just wiggle back forward. And that pretty much helps Johnny dash around the screen. If you so choose to want to do that. Because it is faster than just trying to dash. Dash is way slower. Dash. So that's up to you. Leo also has it, but it's not as potent. Because with him, he has more like a micro run. Also point out, Leo also has a small jump. So he's like Holy Order Soul 2.0. Because even in the Plus R, Holy Order Soul has a short jump. Still has access to the same things like double jump and super jumping, but he has a small jump. So this makes his pressure game a little bit more scary. Also for him, he has Brian Hilder dashes, which don't allow him to FD, but it gives him the ability to pass through his opponents. So his dash movement is a lot scarier in that regard. It's a lot faster. Then you have Eno, who has a hover dash. So Ino has a hover dash. She doesn't have a run like everyone else. That's different for her. She does have access to, you know, the typical double jump, super jump, air dashing forward, air dashing backwards, of course, right? But she has the ability to do this. So her pressure is quite scary when done correctly. But her mobility options, even though that she plays it differently, the fundamentals still apply to her. Even though she has her own set of fundamentals in that regard. She still has access to FDing. You know what I mean? She still has all that. And she can hover dash into double jump. So essentially like how everyone else on the ground has run into double jump, she still gets that with her hover dash. It's not any different. Now there are other options that some people do have, right? I'm gonna turn off her burst because this is specific to her. So Ino does have a way to cancel her jump dust with Faultless defense. So that's her jump dust. You pretty much just hit them all at the same time. This is a part of her mix-up game to some extent. Not as much anymore, but it's another way to also, if you're caught up in the air with her, sometimes you may get caught. Use it for tricks, for throws, etc., etc. And I mentioned before, we talked about Chip having the ability to do something like this as well, and so does Faust. These techniques are not in Strive. Chip does not have it, and Faust doesn't seem to have it either. So specifically for Chip movement, right? His jump down kick, this can be canceled with the Faultless defense. So what ends up happening is Chip and Faust are the only characters in the game, other than Ino, who have a way of like altering their momentum when they're running. So see, when you're running and you're jumping, you still get the forward momentum, right? But if you plink this, what ends up happening is you get to break your running momentum, and it turns your jumps and everything else back into normal jump state. So there's no longer there's no longer run momentum attached to the jumps, because you use this move. Because if you do this with run momentum, it halts it, right? So it makes Chip's angles way more annoying to deal with, and you can do this towards all your jumps. So you can make all of Chip's jumps very shallow, right? So here's run, double jump. Actually, here's run jump, FTC break, run jump, FTC break, FTC break. So you can change up how you want to cross up your opponent if you want to hit in front. And this is just moving around in general. Because some people, they see Chip running and they're like, oh man, he's going to come in on me. So see that? Now I'm back into neutral jump state where we have no momentum, right? Neutral jump, forward jump. See? So this is a thing that I had to learn with Chip. It's like how to attack from different angles, how to utilize this. Because this is a big part of his mix-up game, but it can be used in his general movement to just bait people out into doing things you want. And change your jump arc. So again, like I said, you have more control over your jump arc, right? Now Faust can do the exact same thing. He has a jump down kick. This is utilized for his mix-ups. It's utilized for his neutral. He can't use this. He uses this normal when falling, right? But so you can do stuff like bingo in between plus R or throw. So yeah, you can utilize that to score you throws, overhead and strings. See? So yeah, helps with his neutral, so he gets to carry on this little momentum here from this. See? Alright, so in summary, this is basically, again, I can't stress this enough in this video, that Your movement is by far your biggest lifeline in this series. You learn these concepts, and this will take you very, very far. You have my word, okay? The thing that I challenge and encourage you guys to do in learning Guilty Gear is, like I said before, practice FD braking on the ground. Start here. Get this down. Get used to doing this a lot. You know, mask your movement, mask your intentions. This helps you be more unpredictable towards your opponent. They are not sure what you intend to do. If you're running at them head on like this, then it's going to be more obvious for your opponent to know how to counteract what you intend to do. Okay, even though that you know that they most likely don't know that you want to run up and do this, right? But be smart about it. Use your FD braking. Think about their pokes, right? You know, think about how they want to use their pokes against yours. You know, and can you get in there for the counter poke like that? You know, what's the range you need to be at? You know, to play around those normals. At what point do you need to block? You know, you need to kind of it's essentially like shadow boxing in a sense. You know, and yes, you got to get a feel for how your opponent will react to you running up. And FD stop is a pretty safe way to study them. Correct. That's how you get the data. That's how you get the information. That's how you get the metadata on your opponent, man. That's how it works. I think that about does it. For movement. As I normally end all things with the deuces gooses, so you know how that goes. So deuces gooses. Alright, you guys, yo. Before you dip, just want to come and say thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the first in the 1301 series based on movement. If you have any comments, concerns, anything like that, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Now for real. Deuces gooses.